Wabarakatuh. All right, if we can settle down, we'll get started, inshallah. That includes you, Nino. I'll call you out if needed. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. Is good? Better? Yeah, there we go. All right, so, oh, that's pretty loud. All right, there we go. No, it's good, it's good. I'll just move it away. Just leave it. Otherwise, they're going to turn it down too much. Yeah, just remove that feedback, inshallah. Okay. All right, so welcome to our program. Our program was slightly inaccurately titled Transgender Ideology in the California School System, but actually it's much more broad and comprehensive than that. It's more about, I would say, LGBT or homosexuality and gender ideology, or the concept of gender in the California curriculum. So before we introduce our speaker, and before we get into the legal aspects and the educational aspects and explain what these books are sitting in front of you here, let me just start with a brief introduction to what the stance of Islam is on homosexuality in particular, and the concept of gender, with all the different rhetoric about gender and its different constructions. So I'll take just a few minutes to do that. So Islam's stance on homosexuality is quite clear. I've had a detailed presentation at this masjid about 4 years ago, and like another one about 7 years ago. So it's something that we've been talking about for a while. So Islam's stance on homosexuality is clear-cut, but it's nuanced. And basically what it says is that engaging in a homosexual relationship is considered to be sinful in Islam, but having gay thoughts and attractions or feelings, or what we call same-sex attraction, is not sinful per se. It's acting on them that is actually considered to be sinful. So this is very clear-cut in the story of Prophet Lut, or Prophet Lot, in the Quran, where it says in Surah Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 80, it says, وَلُوطًا إِذْ قَالَ لِقَوْمِهِ أَتَأْتُونَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مَا سَبَقَكُمْ بِهَا مِنْ أَحَدٍ مِنَ الْعَالَمِينَ. Which means that we sent Lot to his people, and he said, do you commit the shameful act which nobody in the world has ever preceded you in? So the word that was used is fahisha. So if Allah is describing the word, the action of engaging in a homosexual relationship as fahisha, which means like lewdness or shameful, shamelessness, it's considered to be something which is rebuked. The next verse, he says, إِنَّكُمْ لَتَأْتُونَ الرِّجَالَ شَهْوَةً مِّن دُونِ النِّسَاءِ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ. It says, you come to men lustfully instead of women. No, you are a people who cross all limits of decency. So the word musrifun is very clear. It requires a lot of stretch of the imagination and linguistic gymnastics to try to reinterpret that to mean something different. Now when it comes to homosexuality, there's another term that is becoming more and more widespread in the Muslim community, and that is SSA, or same-sex attraction. So same-sex attraction is something which people have and they feel, and there are many Muslims who are practicing, they pray 5 times a day, they have same-sex attraction. And it's not fully understood why they have that, but what they're doing is there's a group of Muslims who are choosing to suppress their desires and find another way to either continue their lives that way, or to try to revert in some capacity to homosexuality or heterosexuality when that's possible. So there's a really good website, I'm just going to throw it out there. It's called Straight Struggle, and the pun was intended, right? So the Straight Struggle, and there's a new podcast about to launch in about 2 weeks. It's called A Way Beyond the Rainbow, which is with Brother Wahid Jensen. There's a group of this online international community of Muslims who have same-sex attraction, but they don't want to act upon it because they understand what Islam says about it. So they recognize what they have, they want to learn how to deal with it, and this podcast and this website are 2 good reference points for people who are dealing with that. When it comes to gender, Islam basically understands the concept of sex and gender as basically being the same. The sources of Islam seem to indicate that. So if you look at verses like from Surah Al-Hujurat, chapter 49, verse 13, it says, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa untha. That we've created you from a male and female. And the concept of male and female is contrasted very clearly in almost every single source text of Islam. Islam has always recognized the existence of intersex people, who used to be called hermaphrodites, but that translation is not accepted anymore. Intersex basically meaning that people who have anatomical or physical male characteristics and female characteristics. And what Muslim scholars have basically said was that they're going to be assigned a gender, either male or female, at birth, depending on their situation and what characteristics they have. And by the time they reach puberty, depending on how their body has changed, they're going to be reassigned that gender, but it always falls on the binary. It's either going to be male or female. What's happening today is that this idea of gender identity has shifted now. So there's a difference between sex and your biological sex, and gender, which is now defined as your own perception or your own feeling of what your gender is. So gender has become now, especially in California and in many different parts of the world, someone can be male, someone can be female, somebody can be a combination of both male and female, somebody can be neither male or female. So this concept is not a concept which has ever existed in Islam, and there's not really much basis for this. So this idea of a gender spectrum exists only in the sense that masculinity and femininity exists on a spectrum in different cultures, but not the actual concept of gender itself. Right? So this idea is alien to Islam, and the reason why it's very important for us to understand is that there was a Time magazine article which basically said this. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. They said Islamic orthodoxy and traditionalism is being challenged on the issue of LGBT inclusion. A progressive Muslim movement is forcing Muslim debate and discussion on the limits of tolerance and inclusion, which basically means that people are trying to kind of reinterpret and redesign, re-understand what Islam supposedly meant or is supposed to mean. So today, we're going to be talking about a curriculum in the state of California that has become part of the law. And this part of the law and this curriculum affects every single Muslim that's living in California or that's living outside of California or living in Canada or living in England or living pretty much in any English-speaking or even non-English-speaking part of the world. So this curriculum actually advocates for the normalization of homosexuality as a practice and the normalization of this idea of gender fluidity, that people can define their own gender, and it's under the banner of gay rights, trans rights, gender fluidity being a concept. So I'll end with this statement before I introduce our speaker for today, is that this issue of California curriculum, in my understanding, affects the Muslim community more than any other religious community in the state of California, in America. Why is that? Because the Pew Research Center did a survey in 2017, and they said that 50% of U.S. Muslims, this is 2017, so 3 years ago, they said 52% of U.S. Muslims say that homosexuality should be accepted by society. In contrast, 34% of white evangelical Protestants said that it should be accepted, which basically shifted and made Muslims actually more on the left on this issue or more liberal on this issue than even the average white conservative evangelical Protestant. And then they said the shift in attitudes of Muslims shot up by 25 percentage points between 2007 and 2017. So in 10 years, from 2007 to 2017, the biggest shift of any religious group on their views on homosexuality or LGBT in general has shifted the most of any other religious group in the United States of America. And it continues to shift. And part of the reason is because of Islamophobia, Muslims being a minority, rhetoric from the political structure, and a general alliance with many Muslim political leaders with left-wing politics. So with that, what we have is we have a guest who is someone who really understands the issue, understands the curriculum. So I'll introduce Brenda. Brenda Lebsack, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. And I learned a lot. I did not know those stats. Wow. First of all, I just want to thank your community because on Wednesday, Dr. Sabot and I flew to Sacramento together he spoke on behalf of 500,000 Muslims, in fact, for all parents, and was trying to advocate for parent rights in the state of California. And we only had 2 speakers. It was him and a constitutional lawyer. So I just want to thank you. He has been wonderful to work with, and he was very articulate, and I think some of you saw his speech that he sent out. My name is Brenda Lebsack. I am a board member in Orange Unified School District, which actually covers about 5 cities, parts of Santa Ana, Anaheim Hills, Villa Park, Orange, and Garden Grove. Also, I am a teacher, a public school teacher, and have been for over 25 years, and I've been teaching in Santa Ana Unified School District for 6 years. My mom is a retired teacher from Garden Grove School District for 35 years, so we have a
It runs
lineage.
in the family.
A lineage,
A
yes.
lineage. Very good. All right. Excellent. You've been advocating, you've been talking about SB 48 for a while now, I would take it. Tell us what is SB 48? What is AB 329? Why do we need to know this?
Okay, so mostly I've been talking about AB 329 because in 2015 a new law was passed and it was implemented in 2016, and it's called the California Healthy Youth Act. And by the way, you're going to get a lot of information today, and you might forget a lot of it. If you do, I have put out on YouTube channel, and I have cards here. If you Google my name, I have many 4-minute videos that actually give, it'll show pictures of these books, it'll give demonstrations of the curriculum so that you can share it with your friends who didn't come tonight, and you can go back and look at the links and the exact, the wording from the law, okay, that I give on PowerPoints. So AB 329 says that it's sex education, but they added, it's not the typical sex education that we remember that just talks about puberty, body changes, and kind of the biological parts of sexuality. Instead, it also covers gender identity and sexual orientation.
So just to, for your information, many Muslim parents, even the curriculum on sex education, many Muslim parents kind of like, get their kids out of that, at a very early age. Like, no, we don't want to teach them that, or we'll teach them at home or something like that. Let me ask you real quick, how many of you parents are in the audience that actually excuse your children from the sex education curriculum in any grade? Doesn't matter, 5th grade or 8th grade or whatever it was. Okay? How many of you said, no, it's okay, just go ahead and let them go? And the rest of you just didn't raise your hand. Okay, that's fine. So that was about, for the online audience, that was about 60-40. 60% exempted and 40% said, it's okay. But so what Linda is saying now is, Brenda. What Brenda is saying now is, even the exemption that was taking place and how Muslims are concerned about just the sex education curriculum, now that has been completely modified. And when you hear about the modifications, if you were concerned about what it was, you're going to be concerned about what it is now, right? So please continue. Tell us a little bit more about exactly what is kind of in there.
Okay, so the law says that it is required once to be taught in middle school, 7th and 8th grade, and once to be taught in high school, 9th through 12th grade. It's optional for kindergarten through 6th grade. We also have a framework that was passed in May of 2019. A framework is an elaboration of the law. For example, the law is about 8 pages long, where the framework is about 1,000 pages, and it gives a lot of more detailed instruction. And in that framework, it talks about teaching sex education starting in kindergarten. And we've never had that. I've been a public school teacher for a long time, and I'm like, why are we teaching sex ed to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade? That's never been done.
What was the grade before in the past that it started?
Usually starts in maybe fifth grade when it's for puberty.
That's what I remember. Yeah, okay.
And then middle school and then high school. But now they're taking it all the way down to kindergarten. Now remember, it's optional for elementary. And just so you know, what Dr. Sabot, on Wednesday, we were trying to pass a law that would say if a district chooses to teach sex education to elementary kids, that it needs to have a parent permission slip, and that it needs to have the instruction should be online, because that way parents don't have to take off work to get the curriculum, and also just to make it more accessible and to give it in the primary languages, because we found that it's been difficult for immigrant groups. And I work in a district that's 98% Hispanic, and we've been having difficulty getting things to them in their language. So it's really deceptive, because they're being out of the loop as far as what's being taught to their children. But the committee, as you know, voted no on that, and which means that if a district decides to teach this to young children, and I'm going to give you examples of some of the curriculum for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that a parent permission slip is not required. That's where we're at right now.
So you said right now, kindergarten sex education is optional. So when you say it's optional, define it. Let's define that. Does that mean that they're going to notify you in advance that on this day, your kindergarten child is going to be taught what sex is and relationship between two people, and then you kind of think about it, you go, should I let them go to school that day, or should they call in sick, or can I opt out? Is that what optional means, or does it mean something else?
Okay, good question. So by law, for middle school and high school, a district has to give at least 14 days notice before teaching sex ed or HIV prevention. The law has an ed code, 51932B, that says for gender identity and sexual orientation, that is not an opt-out, okay? So everything else is an opt-out when it has to do with sexual organs and reproduction. But if it's gender identity or sexual orientation, the law says it is not opt-out. Now, there's been a lot of pushback, and because of the pushback, they've softened that, and the ACLU is the one that has been coming down as the enforcement, where districts are afraid of lawsuits. And that's what happened in my district. So when there was pushback from the parents to say, wait a second, ACLU came and wrote a threatening letter to Orange Unified School District saying, you could get sued if you don't implement this. So there's where the problem lies. Districts have been a little bit more, they've been saying, okay, you can opt out of the whole thing then, but you can't just say I'm going to opt out of gender identity or sexual orientation. So they've made some allowances.
Okay. I think with that, let's start with the video, and then we can kind of define more about what this curriculum is going to look like in terms of gender identity. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let me just explain the video in
yes,
that.
Please.
If you go to Advocates for Youth, Advocates for Youth is a website that has been recommended in the state framework 6 times. And they do have one of the curriculum options called the 3 R's, rights, respect, and responsibility. And they have the sex education for kindergarten through 12th grade. Here's an example. If you would just, it's amaze.org. You can go to amaze.org and see many of these videos. This is for 10-year-olds teaching gender identity.
All right. Video is loading again, so let's just continue. It's going to take about a minute or so while the projector reboots. But okay, so this curriculum that we're going to be showing, basically, this is mandatory for grades 6 and up, or 7 and up, as you said?
Okay, every district chooses their own curriculum. So this isn't a mandatory curriculum. There are many districts in the state of California using this curriculum because it's free and it's online. Okay. So it's easy and accessible.
Got it. And what percentage of teachers would you estimate in California that are likely going to be using this curriculum then? If you were to put a number on it.
I can't really say because I don't exactly know.
Okay.
I know Fremont, I just came back in December from a conference of the California School Board Association that happens annually, And for their workshop on sex education, Fremont Unified was platforming this curriculum.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, you need a name. Let's see. Wait a second. What gender are you? A person who is transgender is someone whose internal sense of their gender, being a boy, girl, or something else, doesn't match their physical body. People who feel this way sometimes feel anxious when they begin to reach puberty and their body starts to change in ways that don't match their internal sense of their gender. These feelings are totally normal. If you feel you want more time to explore how you feel about your gender before your body starts to change, it's important to talk with a parent, counselor, therapist, or doctor about the feelings you have regarding your gender. After some discussion and counseling, you may be referred to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologists specialize in hormones, and they are the most likely to prescribe puberty blockers for someone who wants them. Puberty blockers are medications.
Okay, so that was just the ad.
I never heard of this band.
Here's the actual video.
What kind of music do they do? Rock? So what is it, pop? So they do techno, progressive Balkan with a touch of metal? Never heard of that genre. Sexual orientation describes who you are attracted to, may fall in love with, and may have a sexual relationship with. Everyone has a sexual orientation, and there are different words to describe different sexual orientations. Many people are familiar with terms like heterosexual, gay, lesbian, and bisexual. But those aren't the only sexual orientations out there. For example, some people identify as pansexual, which means they are attracted to people of all genders. Many pansexual people feel that gender has little to do with their attractions. In other words, they are attracted to a person, not to that person's gender. Some people are asexual, sometimes called ace. Asexual people feel little or no sexual attraction to other people and have little or no interest in having sex or engaging in sexual behaviors. Many asexual people still feel romantic attraction. They feel love and affection, but may not feel sexual attraction. Demisexual people only feel sexual attraction when they have a strong romantic or emotional connection with a person. These are just some of the labels people use to describe their sexual orientation. Some people don't like to use labels at all, and that's okay too. There are many other terms out there to describe the full, diverse spectrum of human beings, and that's a beautiful thing. Till next time, don't forget to visit me at amaze.org or go to my YouTube channel to watch more. Bye!
Okay, so that was the one on sexuality, and then we'll load the one on gender right now. So just a real quick raise of hands. You just learned some new terms perhaps. How many of you knew what pansexual was? Okay, all the people under 20. All right, how many of you knew what asexual was? Okay, a few more people, like 4 people over 20. And then how many of you knew what was the other one? Demisexual. Demisexual. Okay. So pretty much only people who are in the school system, pretty much. All right. So here's the video on gender. Okay. So that was on sexuality, and the second one is on gender. Here we go.
Can you see, or am I blocking you?
All right, folks, here we go. A romaine and kale salad with avocado, cucumber, shishito peppers, and 4 kinds of cheese. Sprinkled in balsamic straight from Italy.
Wow! In my day, salads only had 2 ingredients. A rock-hard wedge of iceberg lettuce and a stinky old dried-up tomato.
Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have to eat fast. Alex is stopping by in a few minutes to work on our robotics project.
Alex, is that the girl with that weird dog? Or the boy with the hat with the wings that flap?
No, Uncle Jay. This is Alex.
Oh, okay, I remember. A very nice young, come to think of it, well, is Alex a boy or a girl?
Actually, Alex doesn't define themselves as boy or girl.
What else is there?
Back in your day, most people understood the world in terms of just boys and girls. But now, we know gender is more complex than that.
Wait, aren't we just talking about whether you're born with a or a hee-hee?
When you're born, your sex is assigned in a medical way. but the sex listed on your birth certificate may not necessarily match your gender identity.
Gender identity is a person's inner experience of who they are in terms of gender, their deep personal sense of being male, female, a blend of both, or neither.
And while many people have a gender identity that's the same as their assigned birth sex of female or male, that's not always the case, because gender exists on a spectrum. Like transgender, which means a person whose gender identity is not consistent with their assigned birth sex. Non-binary, which means a person whose identity doesn't fall in the category of either male or female. And genderqueer, or gender fluid, which means a person who does not identify themselves as having a specific gender at all.
Does gender identity have to do with being straight or gay?
Actually, no. Gender identity has to do with the way you feel about yourself, while sexual orientation is based on the way you feel toward others, the people you may or may not be attracted to.
You know, I really like Alex, and I can tell they're a good friend to you. But I'm still pretty confused about all of this.
That's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone to respect them. To start, try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender, and use the name and pronouns that they ask you to. Above all, be a friend or ally for people of all gender identities.
That's right, Mom. Oh, Alex is here. Come on in.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, hey, Alex. Care for some salad? The balsamic's right from Italy, you know.
All right. So that's the video. How many of you have heard of gender queer prior to today? Okay. Who's heard of gender non-conforming prior to today? Okay. Who's heard of non-binary prior to today? Okay. So these are just a few terms. There's a whole list of terms. Now, so I can give my own commentary, but I'll ask Brenda since you're here. As an educator, in your professional opinion, what do you think is problematic with these videos?
Well, like you, I also have a faith. And one thing I know about kids as a mom and also as a teacher is that young children, first of all, the younger, the wet cement, they are formidable. They're also innately imaginative, and that's what's beautiful about children. They're also very trusting, especially to someone who has a position of authority, such as a teacher. And so I believe these things to be taught to young children is exploitive and very dangerous. I come from, as a child myself, I was a tomboy. I loved all the boy things. I didn't play with the Barbies. I played with the trucks. And my father was a minister. But they just let me be who I was. And today I'm a PE teacher. When I graduated, I was a peace officer for the Orange County Probation Department. I maybe didn't do typical girl things, but as I went through puberty, those things I kind of grew out of. And so if I was a young child and I was taught these things, it would have brought confusion to me. I would have thought, you know, maybe I'm gender fluid, or maybe I'm transgender. And then the video you showed earlier was talking about puberty blockers, actually encouraging children that weren't sure to go on puberty blockers to stall puberty. Yet we don't even know yet what these chemicals do to kids long term. And many are saying that it's going to cause sterilization.
And that was a paid YouTube ad that just popped up randomly, right? The one that we were looking at, you know? That's how it showed up, basically. So we are talking about this curriculum. This curriculum is going to be coming in schools. Now, how about private schools?
It's already in schools.
It's already in school. It's already in schools. How about private schools? How about Islamic schools? How about charter schools? How about homeschooling? Tell us a little bit about that.
Those are good questions. So charter schools are public schools. They have more autonomy because they're not ran by a district, so they're usually more independent. So they have a little more control as far as what they do because more parent input. In other words, it's easier to steer a small boat than a big ship, right? However, they still are getting public funding, and they just passed a law recently that says charters must follow the California Healthy Youth Act. So they're really putting a strong chokehold on control.
So Healthy Youth Act, that sounds nice.
Oh,
Like
doesn't
we
it?
want our youth to be healthy, right? So why would you not support something called the Healthy Youth Act? Tell
Well,
us a little bit more.
Most of these words do sound wonderful. Welcoming schools, inclusion, those all are words that usually we want. Kindness, acceptance, tolerance. However, it's, in my opinion, more of an indoctrination than it is being inclusive, because as I read the curriculum, like for 7th grade, it looks like those who aren't agreeing with this as it's being taught as fact, rather than as one opinion or perception, then anyone else who has a different perspective is looked at shamefully, as though you are being not inclusive or even hateful. I'm sure you've ran across that. As far as private schools.
Yeah.
So private schools, as of right now, don't have to follow because they are not receiving any kind of government income. However, it was back in 2016, we had it was called, I forget the number of it. I think it was 1466, but anyways, it was an attack on faith-based colleges. And it was saying that colleges would not be getting Cal Grants anymore if they were not, because they were considered non-inclusive, if they were, or discriminatory, if they were teaching such as the Bible or any sacred writing that would be teaching that homosexuality or any kind of, could be sinful.
Yeah.
That would be considered discrimination. So actually, I was on a bus that went to Sacramento with a group of African Americans from Compton. And we went to say, this is discrimination because minorities are going to be discriminated against to send their kids. They're going to be forced into state colleges. They will not be allowed to go to faith-based colleges because they depend on those Cal Grants. So because of that argument, they stopped that bill.
Very good. Excellent. Let's look at the curriculum. Let's look, I have 2 kids, 5 and 6. And if my kids were to watch this video, honestly, they probably wouldn't understand that much of what's going on, because this is kind of directed at maybe a more mature audience or an older audience. But you're saying that this curriculum is already in kindergarten, at the kindergarten level. So how are they going to retarget a curriculum trying to convince little children who are 5 and 6 years old of this type of material, right? So I was going through some of your videos, and you were saying that there's even a book that's intended for pre-K level, right? I don't know if you have that one here. It's Neither.
Yes.
Is Neither here?
I do, yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
this is this book called Neither by Arlie Anderson.
Right.
So I went to Amazon.com. And I just checked, I wonder what the ratings are. I wonder what people's comments are. And it's pretty much 5-star rating across the board, right? So not even like 4.5, just the average is straight up 5-star rating, right? So now this book is basically for a pre-K level. So we're looking at 4 years old, right? That's
Yes.
a 4-year-old. So tell us a little bit about how do you take messaging of pansexual, transsexual, genderqueer. How do you explain that to someone who's pre-K and kind of package it? Tell us a little bit about what this book kind of, how it presents things.
Okay, so this is like a book for a parable on unlimited genders. Let me just show you real quick.
Designed for 4-year-olds. Okay.
Right. It's called Neither, and it starts by saying, once upon a time, there were 2 kinds, this and that. So it shows a bunny and a birdie. And then I'm not going to read the entire story. You can come up here if you want. But it talks about, at the end, basically, it says, but now there are many kinds, this, that, sort of, just, somewhat, whatnot, rather, a little, either, very, neither, and both. Now in 2017, January 2019, we officially have a 3rd gender in the state of California called non-binary. Non-binary does not mean transgender. The way it's defined is you can be both genders, neither gender, anything in between on the spectrum range, or transgender, male or female. So basically, unlimited genders, and that's what this is being taught. Now, just to let you know, as a school board member, we have policies that we passed, such as non-discrimination policy, harassment policy, uniform complaint policy, hate-motivated behavior policy, all of those things. And gender identity is in those policies. Well, I contacted California School Board and I said, wait a second, I'm a CTA member, a teacher, I belong to the teachers union, both nationally and state. So in 2017, I read in my magazine about the gender spectrum with many different pronouns, such as ze, they, here, etc. And
Tree.
I'm like, tree.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, I've never heard this before. So I asked them, before I pass this policy in my district, can you please send me the legal definition of gender identity? And when they sent it, all it said was gender nonconforming. And I'm like, wait a second, that couldn't be right. So I went to our legal counsel of our district. I said, no, tell me the legal definition. And do we have any lawyers in the room? Oh, okay. And so we found out it came from, it's called the California Regulation Code, and it actually was implemented in 2017, passed by the California Equitable Fair Housing and Equitable Employment, okay? And so I just got curious, and I'm like, okay, we have this new legal definition, but they're not telling the policy members. To this day, I have been asking the School Board Association, you need to tell the trustees in the state what this new definition is, because when a legal definition changes, the implications change, correct? That means that I won't pass a policy knowing that if I pass this, I'm jeopardizing teachers' jobs. Because if they're unwilling to use these non-binary pronouns, they could be accused of discrimination or harassment. And their union will not support them because the union helped pass that law and lobbied for that law. So this is the problem. In other words, they are teaching our kids as young as pre-K these new definitions, but the adults, including the policymakers, are clueless, including our superintendents. I talk to our superintendents, and they don't know either.
They don't know the terms, they
parents
don't know
don't
anything.
know. Right. And even when we were going through the framework process, they have a 60-day statewide community input where you can give input into that framework through email. Well, I was speaking in many different churches. It's Spanish, Asian, and I asked, can you please provide this in Spanish, the link? And they said, sorry, it's only in English. I said, in the state of California, how do you expect Spanish speakers, Korean speakers, Chinese, Vietnamese, Arabic to participate? Don't you think these non-English speakers have just as much love for their children as English speakers? But yet we went to the Office of Civil Rights. We did all these things and we were denied. So to me, this is deceptive because they are literally not allowing this access to our non-English speakers, yet they're saying, oh, we are embracing immigrants. We are embracing equitable access. That's in the framework, but yet they did not do it. It's hypocrisy, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the other books, I think you have Who Are You?
Okay,
right?
yes.
Who Are You is there, right?
Yes, I can share this one real quick.
Yeah.
So, who are you? This is important because in April of 2018, it was interesting because the California Department of Education gifted all the districts in the state a free library database called Teaching, well, actually there are 3 databases, and they were free. And what district isn't going to take a free library database filled with books? The thing is about that, though, is once you receive a free database, that means you surpass local control, because it's usually school boards that, pass curriculum and the library books. But see, by giving a free database, it didn't go through the local control school board. And as a teacher, I started looking into this. This was on the health framework, and let me read it to you. It's for kindergarten through 5th grade, I think,
Yeah,
if I remember.
kindergarten
Okay,
through 5th.
Who Are You? The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. I'll just read a few pages for you. Okay. Let's start. Okay. When babies are born, people ask, is it a boy or a girl? Babies can't talk, So grown-ups make a guess by looking at their bodies. And it doesn't even say parents, it says grown-ups make a guess. Some people say there are only two genders, but there are really many genders. I am girl, boy, both, neither, just me. If you look at this picture, is this a picture of a parent with children? What is it a picture of? This is a school environment. This is a teacher teaching children, and if you look at the ages, I would say this is probably a 3-year-old up to an 8-year-old, okay? The curious thing about this book is that in the health framework it said, oh, this book is recommended for parents to teach their children at home, yet it's in the digital database. And in the digital database for teachingbooks.net, it not only has, this isn't under sex ed, this is under English language arts and social studies. And the lesson plans included are nonfiction reading circles. Oh, and let me the last page,
Sure.
just so they can hear this. And for some people, there are more than just two choices. Now, interesting they use the word choice, because when they're teaching it, they'll say, oh no, it's not a choice, you're born that way. So they're really speaking out of two sides of their mouth, because now they're calling it a choice, right? There are just a few words people use: trans, genderqueer, non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, gender neutral, agender, neutroid, bigender, third gender, two-spirit, and there are even more words people are using to describe their experience. This is called the gender spectrum. With it, there's a lesson in the back with a wheel on how kids can discover and experience their gender.
Right. Now, that statement in the book was really problematic for me. So it says, some people say there's only two genders, but there are really many genders, okay? That's an ideological statement, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And see, that's the problem is, school is not supposed to be teaching a particular ideology over the other, right? And that's where it becomes problematic. But it's not only that, is this understanding accepted by the medical community? My understanding is that it's not across the board, right?
Well, that's interesting, because what I did is when I really wanted to find out the origin of the definition. Like, where did this come from? So when I found out when the legal definition was passed in 2017 in Fair Housing, I emailed Fair Housing and I said, can you please send me how this definition came about? What's the origin? They sent me a 300-page document of the public hearing process. And as I read it, I found out the definition came from Equality California and the Transgender Law Center. That's who came up with the definition.
Okay. Now, so the one problem with this, is it's pushing an ideology and it's rejecting another idea. So it's very important to understand the rejection aspect of this. It's not just, this is what we think, it's this is what we think and what you think is wrong, right? So this is problem number one. Problem number two, let's look at a day in the life of Marlon Bundo, okay? That's another one right here. So you got this, tell us about what it says about the stink bugs, right? Because the problem is you have this idea of being welcoming, accepting everyone, but then there's actually teaching children to actually despise and hate people who are actually adopting the opposite view, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So just maybe you could just highlight that part in the book.
Okay, there is a human rights campaign. Have you heard of a human rights campaign?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Human rights.
It does.
Good thing.
Yeah. So Human Rights Campaign is a national organization, and they have a program called Welcoming Schools. And here's the little bookmark. It has a little bus on it filled with kids, and it sounds wonderful, Welcoming Schools. They have already been training teachers in 37 states in the nation on how to have more inclusive, welcoming schools. I contacted them because they, at Christmas, said, we want to give teachers a free gift. I said, okay, I'll take it. So they sent me a case of 32 books on the day in the life of Marlon Bundo with lesson plans. And this is basically a book. In my video, I don't read the entire book, but it pretty much starts with a little bunny, and the bunny lives in the White House, And the grandpa of this bunny is Vice President Mike Pence. And they show the bunny, they pretty much put down President Mike Pence by saying he's boring, and the bunny watches TV and does things, but the bunny is ignored and neglected by his grandfather. So the bunny meets another boy bunny out in the White House lawn, and they fall in love, and they end up getting married. Well, but there's a stink bug that shows up that says you can't get married because marriage is only between a girl and a boy. And then they basically, all the animals come together and they say how different they are and how it's wonderful to be different and unique. And then what they do is they say, we know what we're going to do. We're going to vote out the stink bug, because the stink bug believes that marriage is between a man and a woman. And then we're going to kick the stink bug out of office. And then it shows the marriage ceremony. So I didn't actually show the entire book on my video.
Right. No, that's
but
good.
that's kind of where it's at. And yeah, it's interesting. You can take a look at that.
Yeah, so it's aligning people, and it's telling them, you know what, we need to get rid of these people from office and all of that stuff.
It's
right?
really, the law is clear that public schools are supposed to be politically neutral. However, we're seeing more and more that they are taking political propaganda and using it even in the early grades. And National Educators Association, I've been reading more and more articles that are saying, you know, let's activate the students to show them their power. But they're using their causes specifically. And the reason I started reaching out to imams in particular is because one of the websites, Advocates of Youth, which you saw, they are really targeting Muslim youth, very specifically. When you go to the website, it says, I'm a Muslim, but I'm a different gender. Or I'm a Muslim, and I'm a different sexual orientation. And it even had, it was taking the Quran and the prophets, and it was literally reinterpreting it in order to endorse these different genders and these different sexual orientations. And to me, I was just floored by that. I'm like, that is so wrong. I mean, that's just a sacred line you don't cross. And then they even had some articles in Arabic on the website as well.
Right. And these are professionally produced books. I mean, there's there's images, there's graphics going into it. There's a team working on this. This is not just some random blogger, okay? This is an actual effort, a concerted effort to target the Muslim community with this ideology. Right.
It's in the sex education curriculum, most of the ones that are adopted by the state, they usually have resources telling the kids, if you want more, if you have questions, go to these links, go to these resources. Okay, well, what kid isn't more curious about sexuality, right? That's a natural curiosity for kids. So, especially teenagers. So when they start surfing these links, this is what they go to. The teachers may be totally unaware. They just say, go to these links. It's in the curriculum, go to the links. Teachers probably haven't even looked at them. You know, they don't have the time. But the kids will make sure to look at them. And that's where you find these articles that target Muslims.
All right. Now, one of the things I think that a lot of young people struggle with, especially even Muslim youth in the school system, is that they feel that there's like this, people are getting picked on. There's a harassment against maybe transgender students, or there's a harassment against gay students or something like that. So because Muslims also get targeted, they're like, you know, we all got to band together and we all got to, you know, support one another or something like that. So there's this statistic that was out there that 90% of trans students get harassed, right? Now, first of all, is this data accurate? Is it misleading? And is this data somehow being used to push this agenda? And is there a way to find a healthy balance between, you know, kind of like maintaining ideas of binary gender, right, while not going and harassing people? Like, does one lead to the other? If you say, no, I don't believe in this gender spectrum, I don't believe in this ideology, is that all of a sudden going to force you to somehow start harassing other people or something like that? Can you comment on that? Because I think that's the way it kind of gets presented. So what are your thoughts on that?
Let me say a couple things about that. First of all, they're saying that the reason they want to teach this is to remove gender stereotypes. But the way I see it is it's actually enforcing gender stereotypes, because rather than saying, well, maybe you're a boy that likes to cook, so what? You're still a boy and you like to cook. It doesn't mean that just because you like to cook and clean house, maybe you should think that you might be a girl or doubt your gender. Just because you're a girl who likes to play in the dirt and likes sports and likes, trucks, doesn't mean that, in my opinion, that's stereotyping. But I believe they're actually increasing stereotyping, as you can see in this book, because they actually ask the kids questions. What kind of toys do you play with? What kind of things do you do on your spare time? As though those should be the things that make them discover their gender, right? Okay, second of all, you mentioned about the statistics. I think that's key. Let me tell you what I've discovered. Now, just so you know, your kids are being given surveys, okay? And these surveys ask very personal questions about you as a family, about their beliefs, about their sexuality, about their gender, about maybe drug or alcohol abuse or anything like that. So these are called, in most districts, they're using the California Healthy Kids surveys. And they start usually in 5th grade. You can opt your kids out of those surveys, okay? But most parents don't, because an opt-out means that you have to write a letter of excusal, okay? Otherwise, they automatically get it. So it just takes a lot of effort to do that. In the 7th grade survey that most kids are being given statewide, let me give you an example of the question. It says, what sexual orientation are you? There's 6 choices. Number 1, I'm straight. 2, gay or lesbian. 3, bisexual. 4, unsure. 5, something else. 6, refuse to answer. So out of those 6 answers, how many of those do you think fall into the LGBTQ category? 4. Gay and lesbian, bisexual, unsure. Unsure because LGBTQ, Q stands for queer or questioning. Questioning. And then something else, well, if you're not straight, then something else must be the LGBTQRSTXYZ. We have a lot of letters after that. So what I'm saying is this is very strategic, because as everyone knows, adolescence is a time when kids question. It's a time, a natural phase of life where you're going against the status quo because you're individuating, correct? So to say that you're questioning, especially when presented with all these new options that maybe you've never heard before, and you're being encouraged to experiment so that you can know, of course you're going to say questioning. That automatically, I believe, artificially inflates the stats. Right. And then they ask many questions about, I would say at least 10 to 12 questions about bullying on many different levels. Have you been not only, maybe physically hit, but teased, maybe ridiculed on social media, laughed at, somebody called you gay, or something like that? Well, I don't know about you, but has anybody in here ever been teased as a kid? Honestly? Has anybody in here ever teased somebody as a kid? Okay, so that means all of you are bullies and all of you have been bullied. But I would say that that's a very natural, me being someone who taught middle school for many, many years, it's kind of like the thing middle school kids do. Yeah. So, when you look at a Venn diagram, you look, okay, they're in the LGBTQ category. Here's bullying. You put the two together, and you've got that overlap. That's going to increase, right? When you have questioning and you have all these questions about bullying, that's going to automatically increase the stats.
Right. There was one statement there that you made just now, and it was in one of the videos, I think. It says, school is the place to change and experiment, right? So tell us a little bit about the ways in which school, in university, that's what they say, right? You go to university, you experiment with different politics, different ideas, join different clubs. We're looking at, elementary, middle school here. How are they encouraging children to change and experiment when it comes to gender and sexuality and all of that stuff.
Well, these are the messages we're being given in the curriculum. Don't think that all teachers believe this, though, right? We have many Muslim teachers. We have many Christian, Catholic teachers, and just teachers that, think it's nonsense. So, however, as we have kids now in the universities, these things are being taught in the university level. So my concern is with these new teachers coming in, and as we have the retirees leaving, we're going to have these ideologies more accepted and being taught. So it's very interesting that you say that, because how many of you have seen in your schools maybe a poster that says safe zone? Okay, safe zone. So, and usually it's in a rainbow color, isn't it? Okay, so what they're portraying is that school is the place of safety. Of course we want our schools to be safe, absolutely. But with that is that this is the place, the safe place where you can experience and experiment on your sexuality or gender. But home may or may not be safe, because let me tell you in the framework a new term that they put in there, spiritual abuse. And spiritual abuse is defined by saying people who use religion to justify rigid gender roles. Okay, in other words, rigid gender roles meaning the belief that gender is binary, male and female.
Thank you. Let's move on to the idea of discrimination, non-discrimination policy regulation, right, in the state of California. So in terms of teachers who are going to be there, and the idea of pronouns, all right? Let me just define pronouns again. The idea of pronouns for some people is not normal. There's he and there's she, but now there's different pronouns of them and z and other things. So it's considered to be either disrespectful or much worse than that, discrimination, if you don't use the pronoun that someone identifies as, right? So does that mean that if there's a student who identifies with a different pronoun and the teacher doesn't use that pronoun, can they be penalized for discrimination? Is that in law right now, or is that being considered, or how does that work?
Well, I know of 2 teachers who have already been fired in other states for not using the correct pronoun.
So can you tell us maybe what happened in a nutshell, kind of like what exactly did they do? John was identifying as a she, and they just said, no, he, referring to John, and what
I know
happened?
the one in Virginia was saying, I would rather use your name rather than the pronoun. So he's trying to get around it.
Trying to get around it. Just, I'm just going to keep saying your name, and they still got fired.
Yes, because there was a situation where they were doing this fun game, and the kid endangered himself, and I can't remember, it's a girl or boy, I can't remember, but hit the wall or something, and so he said, help him, and he used the wrong pronoun, and that's why he got fired.
That's it. Used the wrong pronoun.
That was in Virginia.
Wow.
Maybe I should show the pronoun book.
Oh, yeah.
That might
Yeah,
help.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the pronoun book. Again, this is comes from the Human Rights Campaign. It's called They, She, He, Me, Free to Be. Now remember, they're taking this word freedom and authentic self and feelings and making it sound like this is, we're taking away the boundaries of gender so that there's more freedom to be who you really are. Okay?
This is kindergarten, by the way.
Yes. And I will show you, they give you pronouns, and then they give you pictures. So here's a picture saying, this is a picture of he. Now, if you can see that, you'll see that many of those look like males. I mean, females. Here's a picture of she. Can you see that from back there? So if you look, you're going to see pictures of, typically males or females. So they're kind of using this to place in their minds, this is what he or she looks like. In other words, they're removing the gender line. Here's a picture of they, kids or students who are both genders, male and female.
Referring to one person, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah.
they is one person. Here's a picture of Z or tree. That would be somebody who's non-binary. Maybe they consider themselves neither gender or gender fluid. And then on the last page, it says, let me see. Okay. Here it says you can use your own name as a pronoun. You can change pronouns from he to she or she to he. You can use new ones like Z or create your own, like tree. Some people use they, which is a perfect way. There are many more pronouns waiting to be discovered and used. People are creating new pronouns all the time.
So let's talk about what that's actually going to look like. So you have little Johnny in first grade, reads the book, and says, I'm going to identify as tree. Okay, so now the teacher who's in that class has to basically say, Johnny and Josh, you two are a group. You're going to work on this project together. And Josh, when you're done, make sure you give him, you can't say him, so you have to say, make sure you give Tree an opportunity to present. That's exactly how it would have to be. So if someone says, give him, you can't say him, because he identified as Tree, you'd actually have to say like Tree.
If that's how they want to be.
If that's how they wanted to, okay. Now, let me ask you, is this happening?
Okay, that's a good question. I haven't seen Tree or Z, but I will tell you that the National Educators Association for the Teachers Union, like I said, they're in partnership with Human Rights Campaign. They sent me a video to use for back to school for my kids. And it was two kids talking to each other. One was probably in 6th grade. One looked like he just graduated, I think. So what they had a little discussion, and I can send you the link. It's about one of them saying, we need to train our teachers how to be respectful of our gender, because I'm both genders and I go by the pronoun of they. And the other one said, yeah, and I'm neither gender and I go by the pronoun of Z. And they were talking about it back and forth, how they need to train their teachers how to be respectful of their genders.
And you're supposed to show this to your kids. Basically.
Yes, and Human Rights Campaign said it was shown 55,000 times nationwide. So
that's pretty significant. Now, if someone, like you said, kids, middle school, sometimes they, make fun of other kids and all that. So there's pranksters, they're going to play a joke or something like that. So if someone is changing their pronoun, okay, little Sammy comes in, he's a 6th grader, can he just be like, you know what, this week I'm going to become she, and then next week he comes in and he goes, by the way, teacher, I'm back to he again, and the following week, you know what, now I'm Z. And you could actually technically play with the teacher and be like, you know what, this week you misidentified me because I changed to a different pronoun. Is there like some type of court order required to change your gender? Do you have to go to like a psychologist? Do you have to go to a doctor and say, look, I'm being evaluated, I really feel like I'm a different gender? Or these discrimination guidelines, you can just change whenever you feel like it and everyone has to just kind of adapt?
that is a great question. No, you do not have to get identified by a psychologist or a medical professional. You just, as our former state superintendent said, Tom Torlakson, I hope I said it right, Torkelson something. He said, and I'll have to send it to you because it was a press release.
You sent it to me already.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the battery died.
That's okay. I can talk about it.
I'm going to give you this.
Oh, okay.
Just hold it.
Okay. He basically said that kids choose their gender and self-certify to whatever binary or non-binary gender they choose. So basically our laws and our policies say that no, they don't have to. Is anybody here in the Santa Ana Unified School District? Okay. In my district where I teach, we actually have a gender transition form on our website. And it does on the bottom of the form have a parent signature. However, parents are not required to sign that form, okay? Because when a kid decides they're a different gender, And if they talk to a counselor or a school employee, it's the kid that makes the decision if that information is shared with the parents. Because if the kid says, my parents are religious and will not affirm my gender or even sexual orientation, that school employee cannot tell the parents about that kid. In fact, if you have a boy that comes to school and decides, I'm going to experiment with my gender and wear heels and a dress at school, but then I'll change back to in jeans before I go home, teachers are not allowed to tell the parents that the kid is doing that without the kid's permission.
So let's about to wrap it up, and we're going to take questions because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of questions. Who has a question for a Q&A session? So a few questions. Okay, we're almost done. So last two things. For Muslim families right now, for Muslim parents like right now, what advice can you give them immediately that they kind of need to know about? So you mentioned, for example, there's a 5th grade survey that's going to be done. You can opt out of it. To opt out of it, you actually need to write a letter and all of that stuff.
Okay, for elementary, I think it's opt-in, which means it requires a permission slip for elementary.
Okay, so can you just give us like maybe just a list across the board? This is kindergarten, this is 5th grade, this is 8th grade. Here is what you should know. Here is what you should be looking for. You're going to get a notice if it's 8th grade. You're not going to get a notice if it's kindergarten. Just give us like a summary for all the parents for different grades or, grade level. What can they do to protect their kids from this type of curriculum?
Well, first of all, asking questions. Ask questions. Okay, thank you. Ask questions to the teacher, to the principal, saying, are you going to be teaching, especially elementary, young elementary, any lessons about gender or sexual orientation? Because I would like to be notified if that is going to be taught. Also, as a parent, you can kind of feel out a teacher because, depending on what they put on the walls, depending on how they promote themselves, you can kind of find out maybe where they're at as far as their own belief system, right? Also, you can ask if you're middle school or high school. Of course, you can opt out of the sex ed. Just make sure to ask about it and look at the curriculum. I would really encourage you to watch my videos so that I have a video on parent rights, and it's important to know I give you exactly the ed codes so that you can understand what your rights are. And information is power. So all you have to do is go to my name, Brenda Lebsack, and it'll come up. It's a 4-minute video. Knowing what it is important, and I'm trying to think of anything else.
I think that's
good?
good. Yeah, that's good. That's
Of course,
good.
I think after we had that session on Wednesday, and it just really blew my mind because for that Senate Education Committee to completely ignore millions of parents' requests, and all we're asking for, to me, it's offensive because I feel like as parents, we're begging for crumbs. I don't even think we should have a law for this. I mean, we're just asking for a permission slip. We're asking to know what the instruction says. That's our God-given right? I believe as Americans, it's our God-given right. And so it upsets me that our representatives are not listening to us and actually being very demeaning. And it was interesting because we had all these parents of varied races and religions that were saying, please vote for this bill, and yet there was only maybe 8 that came up from organizations and special interest groups, such as Equality California, Planned Parenthood, various groups. Now, there was one from the Academy Pediatrics. Yeah, and that's concerning.
AAP, huh?
American Pediatric Academy, they supported, they didn't want the bill either. So that's very concerning.
That is, yeah.
And we believe, this is an interfaith thing, believe me. We had the California Conference of Catholic Bishops that supported the Islamic Shura Council for Southern California. We had the Nazarene denomination, the Lutheran denomination, Assemblies of God, many Christian denominations, the Spanish Coalition of Churches. We had the NAACP with us for Riverside County because I shared with the leadership about the discrimination. And I said, hey, your mission statement says that you fight for all civil rights, not just African Americans. So they were like, we're gonna help this when we believe in parent rights. So this should not be a partisan issue. This is a parent issue. And to me, it concerns me for religious freedom as well. Okay, because for all religions.
Right, excellent. And last thing, how can Muslims who really want to do something and help this cause, what can they do? Average Muslim sitting here or watching this and they say, this is really concerning. I had no idea this was going on. I want to do something about it. What can they do? How can they help this cause?
Well, number one is awareness, because what I feel like they're trying to do is keep this under the radar. And let's say, shh, we're going to teach. I mean, when I went to vote on this curriculum, I'm like, what? When I started looking at it, I'm like, I've never seen curriculum that had pansexuality, asexuality, the genderqueer umbrella, teaching, I mean, if I may, I mean, it had anal sex on there, some sexualities that had never been taught in public school before. And I'm like, when did this come in? I mean, it came as a surprise. But my superintendent said, oh, Brenda, don't worry about it. Nobody's opting out. It's not controversial. You're just a religious person, so it's just controversial to you. Like, I'm the weird one. But I'm like, no, I don't think parents really know that their kids are getting this, because it was an online course. It was online. Kids would just go on, use a password. Parents just assumed it was sex ed as always. They didn't know the laws changed. We need to make sure parents know what's in the curriculum and that you know. Also, we have school board members. We have an election coming up in March 3rd. Make sure, like for Orange County, how many of you live in Orange County? I can tell you the people that are for parent rights. You know, Dr. Ken Williams has very much advocated for parents. He's going to be up for election, and he's been working with Dr. Sabot as well. We have, you know, some others that, if you're interested, but there are some that kind of go on this more agenda that, no, we're going to do it no matter what parents say.
Right, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions. So what we're going to do is, since we don't have an extra mic, you go ahead and say the question. No, it's okay. I'm going to just say the question. I'm going to repeat the question, and then we're going to have Brenda answer the question. For all of our Q&A sessions, I always like to remind people that it is a Q&A session, and it's not a comment session. It's not a lecture session. It's not a venting session. So please, you know, I know people are they have very passionate about this topic. Probably they want to maybe share an experience or something like that. But first of all, this is primarily a Q&A session. So please answer a question. Try to get to the question as soon as you can. And if you don't get to it within like 15 or 20 seconds, I'm going to maybe have to stop you and say, I'm not hearing a question yet, okay? So everyone, I need the audience to support me in that, okay? Everyone's going to support me in that. We're going to stick to questions. Thank you very much. All right, so let's start with numbers. I'm just going to pull out your number 1, number 2, number 3. Anyone else? Number 4, number 5, number 6. Let's start. Number 1, go ahead. Okay, so there's 2 students and a teacher. One of the students doesn't know what gender they identify as. Is the teacher allowed to call that student an it? Or another student call the student an it if they don't know what they are?
The student usually will, and a lot of times it's because they're getting these teachings that they will say, well, I'm non-binary, so call me Z. Okay, it's usually Z. But no, I mean, you wouldn't do something, if you said it, that would be disrespectful, probably. So, but you know what I would say, as you are teaching your Muslim youth, and I'm glad that youth are here tonight, that this is an opportunity for you to talk to your friends and say, hey, this is what I believe. I believe that, you know, Allah created us male and female. And you are allowed to say that by law. And you cannot get in trouble for saying that.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah. So this idea of male and female, which Islam promotes, is 2. You identify as one or the other. You're allowed to go and tell other people. This is my belief. This is what Islam teaches. People are male or they're female. And if they feel a little bit differently or something like that, it doesn't change the fact that what Allah has created them on. Okay, so
Let me just mention one other thing. When somebody said, this is scientific, I said, oh, really? I said, well, I have a friend, actually a few friends, that are forensic scientists, and they investigate crimes. And I asked them, after decades of being forensic scientists, can you tell me any time that you were looking at a suspect, when you took a blood sample, did you ever find a non-binary suspect? They said, no. I said, really? They said, no, the DNA always comes up either male or female. I said, well, that's scientific.
Very good. Right, I mean, has anyone heard of otherkin before? So there are people who feel that they're actually part animal as well, right? But again, your perception is not necessarily representative of reality. So the thing is, when we're talking about scientific, when we're talking about objective standards, there has to be something objective more than just what people think they necessarily are, okay? Number 2, who was number 2? Yes. The question is, how did all of this start? Did it start with the gay movement, or how did all of this come about in the first place?
I don't totally know, to be honest. It is part of the LGBTQ movement. However, I'm going to tell you that I have talked to some gay and lesbian parents, and when I show them how radical this is, they think it's ridiculous. They're like, we don't want our kids being taught this. And some of them have actually come to our school board meetings saying, we oppose this, and we stand for parent rights. So don't just assume that if somebody is gay or lesbian that they agree with this either.
So, number 3. So the question is it true that LGBT are more prone to suicide attempts?
That's what we've been told.
So I can tell you, I've researched this issue a lot as well. Transgender, in particular, after surgery, post-surgery or sexual reassignment surgery, are somewhere between 6 to 10 times more likely to commit suicide. The problem with that data is that they can't identify what was the factor that caused them to commit suicide, because they're dead and you can't ask them, right? So the thing is to figure out, well, what's the reason why you contemplated suicide? There's so many theories. Some of the theories are, well, you got this sex change operation done and now you regret that decision. But how can you, they're not going to say that they rejected it because they're not alive anymore, right? So the thing is, yes, the suicide rate is very high, which is why before anyone even goes through this operation, sex change operation or different terms for it, there's so many layers of psychological evaluation. People need to understand, they're warned that the suicide rate is extremely high, right? So I mean, anyway, in Islam, this is not permissible to get this operation done. But yeah, in transgender, it's a very, very high suicide rate. So that's well known. Yeah, no, that's a good question. I guess that question is for me. So the Muslim students, the Muslim parents who are excluding or exempting their kids from a sex ed education, what are they doing to kind of fill that gap and kind of do their own teaching? I don't think we've had any sex ed classes inside the mosque, nor have we really been requested to. On an individual level, I've had.
Now you have.
Well, now we have, yes. I mean, on an individual level, I get parents who come in and say, look, I'm too embarrassed to talk to my own kids about sex ed, so can you talk to them, right? So that's what happens during my appointment hours, in my office hours. Samar, now you know, he's wondering probably what I do in the office. So that happens, but this should not be the standard, right? You can't just come to the masjid and say, well, the masjid should organize sex ed programs, okay? The imam should come and not only do counseling and this and that and all that stuff, but he should be teaching your kids sex education. there needs to be a much better, structure for that. So I agree. What you mean is it needs to be done. You can't just exempt them, and then you don't cover it, and then they're going to get it from their friends. They're going to get it from the movies that they're watching. They're going to get it from YouTube videos. They're going to get it from wherever else they're going. Yeah, is that right? You can't exempt in high school? Yeah.
Yeah, but
You would know.
health class is one thing, but part of the health class is the sex ed. So sex ed, you should be able to opt out. Yes.
She seems to be in. She would know. So
Well,
yes.
then they're misinforming you. Not the entire semester of health education, okay? But, oh,
Yeah, it could be. That's
could
fine.
be you were
It's
misinformed.
fine. All right, number 4. Yes. Okay. So the question is, what's the yeah. So the question is, what's the real agenda behind why the state is teaching this curriculum starting at kindergarten? What's the real underlying reason behind it, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's a definite assault on religion. I will say that. Because, I mean, when I went to the California School Board Association, we have these general sessions with everybody, and the main song they used was from the Beatles, the one that says, imagine no religion, imagine no heaven nor hell. Wouldn't life be a better place? Wouldn't the world be more peaceful? You know? And I thought, isn't that interesting that that's the song they chose, Imagine. I believe that I can only give you what I think, but I will tell you the teachers union is really pushing this. I heard somebody, as I started going to some of the conferences. Now, I'm not saying that teachers in general are for this. Most teachers are very busy people, and they really don't know what's going on politically in their union. They only concentrate on if their union's giving them raises, if their union's protecting their health benefits, if their union is, protecting their job. But they don't know what's going on politically. But politically, the union is very, very powerful, one of the most powerful in the nation, the teachers union, okay? When I went to a conference, I talked to a lobbyist, and I told him this. I used to teach high school in Vegas, and I said, in Vegas, it was particularly, this area was a Mormon community, but I had LGBT kids, and I said, in my English class, I had one Mormon student say during class, well, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and gender is God ordained, or male and female. I said, how do you think I should have addressed that student to respect the diversity of my class? And that lobbyist said to me, you should treat that student as though he said, black people should be burned at the stake. I was shocked when I heard that statement. I was shocked. Well, then I told my friends, a couple friends, I said, you have to come with me to another conference because I can't believe what I'm hearing. And I went to this other, and it was the LGBTQ caucus president. There was 40 people in the room. I raised my hand and I said, this is what I heard the lobbyist say. Do you agree with that statement? And he, without hesitation, yes. And I said, how can you have this bias that anyone who doesn't agree with your perception is affiliated with the KKK? That to me was very offensive and hateful.
And that's the culture that we're dealing with. So people need to understand how hostile the culture is around this issue. Okay, number 5. We're number 5 or number 6? 5. Who is number 5? Number 5 left? Oh, number 5. There you go. question is, let me just repeat it for the video. So the question is, the book Who Are You is listed under the social science curriculum and not the sex ed curriculum. Why was it listed under social science, and what are the implications of that?
Well, I think they're trying to put it in all different kinds of subject matter. We do have another law called Senate Bill 48, and it says that by law, just as we have black, we celebrate different races, different religions, and, give credibility to those, and whatever kind of contributions, Indians gave, or Black Americans, or, whatever, Mexican Americans. What they said in this law is that we need to start including lesbian, gay, transgender, queer individuals and whatever contributions they have given historically, starting in kindergarten in our history books. So that is integrated into history books. That is not an opt-out. That's just integrated into the subject matter.
Thanks. And last one, number 6. You're 6, right? 6. And this will be the last question. Yeah. Okay, so the question was this law actually voted on in the public when it got passed? And who is actually working to kind of undo this law?
Which law specifically?
You mean the gender curriculum? So the gender,
Okay.
the gender curriculum being introduced into the state of California, was it actually voted on? How was it voted on? Who voted it in? And who is actually working to kind of undo whatever ramifications had happened?
AB 329, the author of the bill is from San Diego. Her name is Shirley Weber, and it was lobbied and endorsed by the California Teachers Association and the ACLU. So what are they doing to undo the law? It's not easy to undo a law. One thing we're trying to do is what we did on Wednesday, is create new laws that amend the law, that kind of strip it down, which was just voted down on Wednesday.
So that's the state we're in. So,
I just want to mention one more thing on her question
Sure.
about why this is happening. I think, I'm not sure, but it makes me wonder if they're encouraging kids for puberty blockers, and now we've got this HIV prevention. And by the way, that's a whole other subject, but as I started, before I was a teacher, I worked for the Orange County Probation Department, and I actually was part of the group that did the AIDS prevention curriculum. And when I was reading through the HIV prevention, I saw a lot of red flags, and I'm like, and this does not look right to me. These stats do not look right. So I started going to the CDC and looking at the stats, and I'm like, this is incorrect information. First of all, it says in the law that you have to use FDA-approved methods, okay, when you're teaching HIV, but when they were teaching anal sex, there is no condom that's FDA approved for anal sex, okay? So they're actually breaking the law. They're breaking their own rules when it comes to that subject. The statistics they were giving were incorrect, but I said, why are you giving these inflated statistics? They were saying things like, if you're a homosexual, you're not at higher risk of HIV, that's a myth. I'm like, but that's not what the stats say. It shows that you are at higher risk. But they were using stats for Africa rather than America. Right? And I'm like, because the law says you must affirm sexual orientation. So the publishers say, because we have to affirm, we don't want to offend. But I'm like, but this is a disease that, yes, you can live with it, but it's incurable. So why would you give a false, why would you lie to kids on something this serious? See, that to me is just immoral.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you very much,
Yes.
Brenda. I just want to say that we are, a lot of Muslims are confused on this issue, especially Muslim youth. And what's happening is that a lot of parents are coming, even young parents are coming and telling me that this is actually causing a lot of disruption in their own family. So what's happening is that 40-year-old parent is coming home and trying to explain to their children about homosexuality or about just the idea of gender ideology, and their kids are basically saying, you're just a backward, bigot, transphobe, homophobe to their own parents, right? And I'm not talking about immigrant parents. I'm talking about parents who are born and raised here in America. I'm talking about white, African-American, convert Muslims who have children. They themselves, who know this culture very well, are dealing with the exact same issue. So we're not talking about something small. We're talking about an effect that's not only going to impact the way in which you practice your religion, it's going to impact even your family and the stability of your own family. So to rectify some of this confusion within the Muslim community, we're going to be releasing a paper, a position paper from California Islamic University, hopefully within the next month, clarifying just Islam's stance on LGBT. And the Fiqh Council of North America is also going to be passing this position paper, hopefully at their next conference, which should be about in May. So just look out for that, be aware of that. And again, I'd like to thank Brenda for coming. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And thank you to the audience for being a great audience. All right? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You'll stick around for a little bit if there's some questions. Yeah. So we'll both stick around if there's any questions, especially for her. She'll stick around. You can come and ask privately, all right? Please help us with the chairs if you can. We can start folding these